Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with prime rib gravy. That's right, we've all heard of serving gravy with prime rib. But what about serving gravy instead of prime rib? I mean, it would be nice to have both. But what if we didn't win the lottery and we don't have a corporate expense account to buy food? Well, in that case, I'm going to show you how to make a gorgeous, beautifully beefy gravy that is so good and so meaty, no one will actually miss the prime rib. Oh yeah, that's our story, and we're sticking to it. And to get started, the first thing we'll need is a couple beef rib bones. And the best place to find those is on a prime rib. But if you don't have one of these, there's other ways to get them, which I'll explain in a minute. But if you can get one, it will often come tied up or in a net bag. And if we cut that off, you'll see it was used to hold down these rib bones, which butchers, to make things easier for us, will trim off and then put it back on. So for this gravy, the first thing we'll do is remove those. And if it's still attached, just go ahead and cut it off. And since I am going to do a follow-up video where I cook the prime rib, I'm going to go ahead and pop this in the fridge for now. And then for the rest of this video, we will proceed as if you only have the bones. And as you can see off this 5-pound prime rib, I got 2 bones, which I'm going to go ahead and cut in half. And to do this without the actual rib, all you have to do is ask the butcher for these bones, which they will often sell separately right in the meat case. But if they don't, just tell them how many you want, and they will make it happen. All right, they might need a day or two warning, but they will definitely find them for you. And then what we'll do is transfer some onion, celery, and carrots onto a buttered baking pan or dish. And here I'm using a little bit of foil for some easy cleanup. And yes, please leave the skins on the onions, since that is actually going to help give our gravy a deeper color. And then what we'll do is arrange our rib bones over the top. And that's it, we don't have to season this or do anything else, except pop this into the center of a 450-degree oven for 1 hour, or until our ribs are severely browned, and many of our onions have actually turned black, which looks like a problem, but it's not. It is actually the opposite of a problem, and exactly what we want it to look like. And then what we'll do is transfer our meat and veggies into a saucepan, but do not just dump it all in. All right, we'll want to use tongs and or a spatula, because we want to leave behind any and all of that beef fat that rendered out during the cooking process, which we will then pour into a ramekin and save for later. And that's going to be one of the key elements to this amazing tasting gravy. So don't toss that, pop it in the fridge until we need it. And sure, we could have strained it, but probably not necessary. But anyway, we can pop that in the fridge and save it. And then what we'll do is place our saucepan on the stove over high heat, and we will transfer in 4 cups of very high quality beef bone broth, or as me and my parents used to call it, beef broth. And then we will also add a couple of cups of cold fresh water, and we'll wait for this to come to a boil. And once it does, we can give it a stir and back our heat down to low. And the reason we need a really nice beef broth here is because 2 rib bones is not enough to make a really rich gravy. But with the head start of using an actual bone broth, which already has a decent amount of those dissolved connective tissues in it, or using that along with these very flavorful roasted bones, we're going to end up with something that hopefully tastes like liquid prime rib. In fact, I probably should have trademarked that. Although I bet there's a lot of paperwork, so never mind. But anyway, like I said, once this boils, we'll reduce it down to low, and we will simmer it gently for, believe it or not, around 4 hours, or even longer, until that meat is definitely fallen off the bones. And that, along with the vegetables, are completely and utterly flavorless, meaning all the goodness has been leached out into that liquid. Oh, and by the way, while this simmers, we definitely want to skim any and all fat that rises to the top, and add it to that ramekin of reserve fat from earlier, since that is definitely going to get used when we turn this into a gravy. So we are going to simmer this forever, skimming fat along the way. And then once we feel it's gone long enough, we'll remove it from the stove, and we will very, very carefully strain it. And the safest way is to pour off the liquid first, and then dump in those solid chunks. And we will let that drain thoroughly for a few minutes. And once again, if you taste a piece of this meat, and it has any kind of beef flavor at all, it did not simmer long enough. But this was tasteless, so we did a good job. And that's it, we should be left with a gorgeous, super dark brown, relatively clear beef broth, fortified with those roasted prime rib bones. And that's it, we'll simply let this cool down to room temp before we use it. And if we're making it ahead, of course, we can pop that in the fridge. And once that's set, we can move into final prime rib gravy production. And that's going to start by melting a couple tablespoons of butter over medium-high heat, to which I'm going to add about a cup of sliced mushrooms, along with a big pinch of salt. And the mushrooms are technically optional, like everything else in life. But I do highly recommend them, since I think it makes the gravy taste better. Plus, it's a proven medical fact that mushrooms help prevent all the major diseases. So I'm definitely going to use them. And before we add anything else, we'll cook these until they're beautifully browned, which hopefully looks a little something like this. And then once our mushrooms are set, we'll go ahead and toss in 2 tablespoons of that reserved beef fat. And we'll go ahead and give that a stir, at which point we'll toss in our all-purpose flour. And we'll stir all this together to form, yes, you got it, a roux. R-O-U-X. Oh yeah, the X is silent. And once the flour's in, we will cook this stirring for about 3 minutes or so to take off that raw pasty edge before we stop and grab our reserved beef broth, and we'll go ahead and transfer that in all at once while whisking the entire time. And then once we feel like that roux's been completely dissolved, and this has all been mixed very thoughtfully, we can stop whisking, but only until this starts to simmer. And then we'll start whisking again. Because as you might know, a roux thickened gravy or sauce will only fully thicken up once it starts to boil. And if that happens and you don't stir, theoretically it could scorch onto the bottom. And like I said, once that does boil, that is pretty much as thick as your gravy is going to get. And after cooking this for a few minutes, you could use it. But we're going to take this one step further. Okay, we're going to reduce our heat down to medium-low, or somewhere between medium-low and medium. And we're going to simmer this, stirring occasionally, until it reduces down and thickens up a little more. And once it does reduce down to the texture we want, we'll go ahead and grab a spoon and give this a taste, at which point we'll proceed with final seasoning and flavoring. And depending on how much salt was in your beef broth, you might need some salt, which I did. And then we'll also do some freshly ground black pepper, and of course a few shakes of cayenne to stay on brand. And then last but not least, a secret ingredient, a teaspoon of balsamic vinegar, which basically simulates the flavor profile of us having deglazed our pan with a little bit of really good red wine. And no, it's not really going to be enough to notice, but it is going to add what we used to call back in the day, a little something something. So we will stir that in and probably give it one last taste. And that's it. Once we're happy with that, we can transfer it into a gravy boat, and we can take some contractually obligated pictures to show off that absolutely stunningly gorgeous color. I mean, come on, who cares what it tastes like? Look at that color. But you'll be happy to know it tastes amazing as well. And if we do have a portion of perfectly pink prime rib ready, we can go ahead and slowly and seductively pour that over the top. And if you tune into the next video, you'll actually see me eat this. But for now, we're going to pretend we don't have any prime rib. And instead, we'll go ahead and serve this up on some toast. Yes, some toast with a ring of Duchess potatoes piped around it, so we can create what I like to refer to as lake gravy. And that, my friends, even if you don't have the prime rib to go along with it, is just a truly fantastic thing to eat. Okay, as long as you took your time and didn't skip any steps, and you seasoned this properly, it really should taste like what I described earlier as liquid prime rib. And yes, one day I will demo the Duchess potatoes, since everybody should know how to make those, whether you pipe those around a piece of toast or not. But anyway, the point is, with this magnificent gravy, not actually having any prime rib is not a deal breaker. In fact, my wife Michelle actually honestly prefers this to putting the gravy over a piece of prime rib. And after enjoying this myself, it's kind of hard to argue. Although since we're married, I did anyway. And of course, if you want to toss some beef-friendly herbs into the gravy, go for it. Right, a little touch of rosemary or thyme or tarragon would be wonderful. I mean, you are, after all, the Cajun Navy of your prime rib gravy. And speaking of rescuing things, this stuff is so good. If you did cook a prime rib, and maybe it was a little too dry or a little overcooked, you put a ladle of this stuff over the top, and most of your guests won't care. And the ones that do, oh, they go on the list. You know the list. But whether you are fortunate enough to have a prime rib, or you just want to make a gorgeous, super delicious gravy that tastes like prime rib, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.